afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the June 24th, 2026 Urban Renewal Agency meeting and Eugene City Council work session. Thank you for joining us in this hybrid meeting format. For work sessions like this one, there is no opportunity for public comment, and those wishing to access the meeting can do so by watching the live stream available on our website, the broadcast on Comcast Channel 21, or by calling into one of the phone numbers listed for this meeting on the public webcasts and meetings materials page of the City of Eugene website. Thank you all again for joining us, and I now call the June 24th, 2026 Urban Renewal Agency meeting to order. And I'll turn to our agency director to introduce the first topic, which is a work session on downtown tenant improvement program and right-of-way projects update.
Thank you. The agency board is asked today to consider a proposal from economic development staff for a tenant improvement grant program funded by $1.5 million from the Downtown Urban Renewal District and $500,000 from the Riverfront Urban Renewal District. Eligible projects will receive grants making lasting improvements to commercial spaces in order to reduce downtown commercial vacancy rates. Staff will also provide updates on several recently completed and upcoming right-of-way projects in the core of the city.
Right, good after, this thing is on, yes? Okay. Good afternoon, Mayor and Agency Board. It's good to see you again. I'm Ann Fifield, the Economic Development Manager in the Community Development Division. Today I am here with Dylan Huber-Heidorn, a development analyst on our team. We're here to talk about a proposed program to incentivize commercial activity in the downtown core. But before I hand it over to Dylan for the main topic, I have a quick update on work on right-of-way projects. I want to share information about some projects we've completed and give you a preview of some larger projects we'll bring to you this fall. And then after that, Dylan will cover the proposal for tenant improvements. Let's see, both the Downtown and the Riverfront Urban Renewal Districts authorize the use of tax increment financing on physical improvements to address safety and comfort, which includes street and sidewalk improvements. The agency board must approve expenditures greater than $250,000, but over the last 2 years, we've implemented some smaller projects that were below that threshold, and we want to make sure you all know about them. Community development staff have been working with an interdepartmental group to identify and prioritize projects. We've identified solutions that are cost-effective and minimize operation costs for the long term. Over the course of 2 planting seasons, we've planted almost 200 new trees in the downtown. We've prioritized this work because it's a cost-effective way to immediately improve downtown's visual appearance, and it has a climate benefit, and the tree's benefits will only expand with age. We've also invested in new garbage cans. We've replaced the mismatched cans that were around the downtown with one single style. These cans allow hands-free use for the user, but importantly, they're easy for custodial staff to empty, and they're difficult for anyone to reach in to pull garbage out, which can often leave a mess on the sidewalk for custodial staff to clean up. We've also installed bicycle racks to accommodate over 200 bicycles downtown, and we've repaired sidewalks throughout the downtown, eliminating trip hazards. Today, I also want to bring you a preview of proposed larger projects that we plan to bring you later this year. Let's see, one includes landscaping at the intersection of Broadway and Olive. Over the past few years, the city has used temporary planters at this intersection to discourage negative behavior and improve aesthetics with plants and flowers. We're exploring the cost to replace that temporary solution with in-ground landscaping and irrigation to enhance the appearance and functionality of the intersection. This is a draft rendering of the proposed changes on Olive Street north of Broadway. We also plan to bring you requests for projects that will help improve the north and south connectivity in the downtown core. These proposed projects are part of our efforts to build connections between the positive activity up at the Fifth Street Market and the Farmers Market Pavilion, the growing vibrancy on Willamette just south of 11th Street, and in 2028, 1059 Willamette will be redeveloped and will be a new point of positive activity. This fall, we plan to bring proposals to you to make investments in the right-of-way that will improve pedestrian connectivity between these points. The first one is on Oak and Pearl between 6th and 7th Streets. We're working on designs and cost estimates to improve the pedestrian experience from the Farmers Market Pavilion up to the Market District. The existing sidewalks are narrow, they slope in a variety of directions, and water pools on the sidewalk. We're working with urban forestry to maintain the current mature tree canopy and provide adequate planting space for successive trees. This project includes the west and the east side of Oak Street and the west side of Pearl. It does not include the sidewalk immediately adjacent to the federal building. The third project that we're exploring is to improve pedestrian safety along 6th and 7th from Charnelton to High. In this project, we would reallocate the right-hand travel lanes of both avenues from through traffic to parallel parking. It would also add curb extensions and temporary physical protective treatments. This would shorten the crossing distance for pedestrians, thereby significantly lowering their exposure while also slowing motor vehicle speeds. The project would create a barrier between a busy road and pedestrians while adding on-street parking to support local businesses. The traffic modeling shows this would not affect overall travel times. It's planned as a pilot. Design adjustments or reversal would be possible. The project is intended to be installed relatively quickly and would be supported by community outreach both before and after installation. In this way, the city can best learn from and be responsive to community input. Our work to date is very preliminary. Today's information is just to give you a preview of the full proposal that we'll bring you this fall. And so now I'm going to hand it over to Dylan, who will describe our proposal to create a program to encourage commercial activity in the downtown. This proposal is an eligible expense in both urban renewal districts in the financial assistance subcategory under projects directed/initiated by the agency board. Dylan.
Thank you, Ann. Tonight, we're bringing a proposal for a tenant improvement grant program for your consideration. Based on precedents from other cities and feedback from property owners and brokers, staff believe this program would put a valuable new tool in our economic development toolbox for building downtown vitality and promoting business activity. Despite progress on many fronts, downtown Eugene has far too many vacant storefronts. Inactive ground floor spaces create dead zones, discouraging foot traffic and hampering overall vibrancy. Additionally, there are too many empty offices that once accommodated well-paying jobs in the neighborhood and supplied daytime foot traffic and customers who enlivened the streets and supported local businesses. This program seeks to convert those vacant spaces back to hubs of activity and entrepreneurial activity. Eugene has the makings of one of the best downtowns in the region, but these gaps in our urban fabric pose a challenge that impacts our other efforts. While total downtown visitation is holding steady or increasing, downtown employment is still trending downward, and those employees spend fewer days in the neighborhood than they once did. In the post-COVID era, downtowns need to offer more diverse offerings, providing a richer mix of gathering places, entertainment, employment, recreation, and retail activity. These amenities will complement the housing that we've been striving for. There are many reasons why a commercial space might be vacant. This program seeks to overcome initial funding hurdles for tenant improvement projects that would make units more suitable for their next business tenant. As construction costs have risen for this kind of work, rents for commercial space haven't risen at the same pace, creating new funding gaps that disincentivize building owners from making risky investments in downtown building stock. The property owners and brokers that we spoke to shared that costs for these projects outweigh the potential increases in rental revenue. In 2024 and 2025, the agency board approved amendments to the two urban renewal plans, authorizing financial assistance for physical improvements that address urban renewal goals. Eligible activities described in the plans include improvements to ground floor storefronts and vacant or underutilized commercial spaces. Since then, staff have been developing this program concept based on conversations with downtown property owners, managers, brokers, and business tenants, and we recently completed an outreach push to get feedback on the specifics of the program detailed in Attachment A of the AIS. Conversations with these stakeholders refined the details of this proposal, as did conversations with other cities that have successfully utilized similar tenant improvement programs, including Reno, Chicago, Tigard, and Beaverton. The central goal of the proposed tenant improvement program is activating commercial spaces and encouraging more business activity, workers, and visitors downtown. This could mean bringing businesses into empty storefronts or enticing firms back into upper floor offices. The Downtown Priorities and Projects public engagement effort highlighted a shared vision of downtown that is full of people and activity, with residents, employees, and visitors enjoying the city together throughout the day. The community identified strengthening downtown's commercial environment as one of the key opportunity areas for the neighborhood. That outreach ultimately led to the Urban Renewal Plan amendments, incorporating investments in commercial space as a new project category. Improving our commercial building stock and supporting downtown businesses would invite more jobs, and those employees and their customers will be out and about in downtown Eugene, contributing to the overall vibrancy of the heart of the community. These funds would cover a portion of the costs associated with adapting commercial spaces to new uses or upgrading commercial spaces with modern features. Attachment A includes a full proposed program description. The proposed program would provide grants for eligible projects. Grants would be awarded specifically for permanent building improvements that support business retention, expansion, and recruitment in downtown. These are improvements that add long-term value to the downtown building stock that could benefit multiple future business tenants, including things like interior reconfiguration, plumbing, electrical work, and other unseen building systems, ADA upgrades, and more. Some improvements will directly impact building valuation and tax receipts. Grants could cover work like adding a fume hood to a space that would make a great restaurant, or adding a fire suppression system to a future gathering place or music venue, or updating an office space to attract a regional or national employer looking to open a satellite office in downtown Eugene. New and existing businesses might want to pursue these funds themselves, so the program is crafted to allow building owners, managers, or business tenants to apply for grants. It's important for the program to be administratively quick so it can function for businesses that are on the hunt for a new location. Again, these grants would fund lasting improvements that increase the value and utility of the property, not features or furniture that would only be around as long as the next tenant. Temporary improvements, non-commercial uses, and new construction are not eligible. The Urban Renewal Agency would pay up to 70% of total project costs. So there's a match requirement for applicants to pay at least 30% of total costs. Individual grants could be awarded up to $250,000. We're not proposing a minimum. This strategy ensures we leverage limited urban renewal funds to catalyze investment and broaden our impact. We're proposing this as a 5-year pilot, funded with $2 million of urban renewal funds, $1.5 million from the downtown district, and $500,000 from the riverfront district. The proposed program boundary matches the Downtown Core Housing Initiative. It includes all of the downtown urban renewal district and a portion of the riverfront district that feels like the core of downtown. The program priorities are also the key eligibility criteria. All applicants would need to demonstrate how their project fills vacant commercial space or prevents vacancy in the long term, and we would deny applications that don't align with the goals and objectives of the urban renewal plans. In addition to those core requirements, applicants would need to show how they meet at least one of the other priorities: ground floor activation that promotes engagement between commercial uses and the public realm outside, energy efficiency, increasing downtown employment, or emphasizing financial, cultural, entrepreneurial, or civic opportunities for marginalized populations. These are the steps we can expect if the agency board chooses to move forward with the program. First, we would develop resolutions for implementation with more detailed program rules aligned with the board's preferences. Next, at a future meeting, the board would have the option to approve those resolutions. After that, staff would develop administrative rules and open the program for applications. Over the coming months and years, we would promote grant opportunities and accept applications and award tenant improvement grants. And staff would return to the agency board for direction if the 5-year pilot period expires, if funds are expended from one or both urban renewal districts, or if we perceive that changes are needed to increase the program's appeal. Today, you have several options described in the AIS. You could provide direction to prepare resolutions to implement the program, which would cover both the downtown and riverfront urban renewal districts if you choose to adopt staff's proposed program boundary. Staff could base the details of those resolutions on the program details contained in Attachment A, or the agency board could request changes to those details. You can also request an additional work session to have more time to discuss the details of the program, or you could take no action on staff's proposed program. So with that, staff is ready to take questions.
Thank you very much for that presentation. I'll now open the floor for council discussion. I have Councilor Groves in the queue, and I'll keep an eye on the remote council. Councilor Keating also. Councilor Gross.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you very much for the presentation. I'm thrilled that we're putting some more energy and effort and resources into our downtown, which I think is critical to our entire city. I do appreciate that. I support the proposed pilot program. I'd like to see what that produces. For the city manager, Jenny, can you speak directly about your experience with tenant improvement programs that you saw in Beaverton?
Yeah, so in Beaverton, there were several tenant improvement programs, and basically, the difference between not having one and having one is that it could make or break whether a business comes into your community. Many of the businesses, particularly in downtown Beaverton, which they were trying to diversify as much as possible to people of color, to LGBTQIA, to immigrant community, trying to help them get over the goal line and get in because so many of the TIs were just cost prohibitive. This was a system that really helped them make that leap into the business. In addition to getting support from, I think what we will have is the business liaison that you've granted funding for. So I do think this is really critical. It's going to be a catalyst for getting new businesses. And it's something that I think it's better late than never that we're doing this, and the fact that we're taking the time to have $2 million worth of investments made into the community matters. And I think a 5-year program pilot is appropriate. And I'd love to see this just continue in perpetuity.
Thank you. That's very helpful to hear that. Are there plans for a public information piece on this? Oftentimes we do really good work, but nobody seems to know about it. And so I think that that's really needs to be a critical step as we move forward with this type of thing, so they understand the why.
Yeah, we certainly would plan on there being a major push to get knowledge about the program if it's put in place, spread through the community, especially how it might complement our existing programs, loans, and through the work of our current business liaison position, we'd certainly lean on that existing position and perhaps the new position as well in the future to make sure that businesses know this opportunity is out there, because if they don't know about it, they can't apply for it.
Great.
And I'll add on to that. We have an outreach effort to property owners with properties in that boundary, property owners and commercial real estate brokers. And so we have found in the brokers, they're the key linchpin to connect between potential tenants and property owners. And so we've actually, most of the feedback that we've gotten on why we formed the program this way is from talking to folks who are representing property in the downtown.
Excellent. I think it's really important we pull in DEI on this if we haven't already. And I also think it's important to bring in property owners of vacant properties too, and say, look, we're going to start working on this and see what we can do to help them get those places filled, and if not, what we can do on the coercion end. Because, you know, the bottom line is you have a carrot, but we need a stick to follow it up with. My last question is on the road modifications that design staff are working on. Are we collaborating with the fire department?
That's a good question that I can't answer right off the top of my head, but we'll make sure that we are, and we'll provide full information on that element of it when we come back in the fall.
One thing to consider as we get bigger buildings in downtown, it requires more use of elevated aerial devices. And to raise an aerial device, you need to set your stabilizers, which can take up about 18 feet of width. And the way we pour concrete in places, there's a lot of spots in downtown, you could not do that. And the width of the wheelbase is not enough to support the cantilevered weight of an extended aerial device. So that's something that would help. And I know, even as a counselor, I constantly send road updates to fire operations about roads that are closed for repair, and they generally respond back, thank you, we had no idea. And I think it's more important that our fire department know what's open and what's not than it is for this council. So, and I know that's not your area, but as we work to improve the street grid downtown, and I support walkable, friendly streets that are safe and keep people out of the travel lanes or minimize the time they're in the travel lanes. But it's still, we need to be having our emergency responders. Police don't have the same problem fire does.
For the reminder.
Thank you very much.
Counselor Keating, and then Counselor Krasinski, and Counselor Zelenka.
Thank you, Mayor. I broadly and enthusiastically support and applaud this work, so thank you. I have a few questions similar to Councilor Groves around vacancy, vacant or underutilized spaces. Do we have a heat map of, and forgive me if it's in the AS and I missed it, do we have a heat map we can share with council about those spaces that are vacant or underutilized? Because if this doesn't pan out or doesn't work, in the future, I would be interested in exploring what other municipalities have done in regard to a vacancy tax, or really being more heavy-handed. At this juncture, it doesn't. That's clearly not on the table. But I would be interested in seeing in this downtown and riverfront urban renewal districts where those vacant buildings currently exist.
We don't currently have that in the form of a heat map, but we do have data showing just the trends in vacancy over time. And as part of implementing this program, we would look to fill in some of those gaps in our information about where exactly the vacant spaces are, where they're concentrated, what their nature is. So it's an opportunity as well to do some data gathering as this is going into place, to be able to produce something like a heat map and have that more detailed data.
It would be greatly appreciated. Why is the proposal a map, the proposed map on slide 11? Why is it just the downtown urban renewal district in its entirety and a portion thereof of the riverfront? Why is it not both urban renewal districts in their entirety?
I think we developed the program with the intention of focusing on the core of the downtown, which, precedent from the Downtown Core Housing Initiative had demonstrated to be this targeted area of the western end of the riverfront only. That's what we came with in this proposal.
It's the part of town that has the most challenges. On the other side of Ferry Street, where Franklin turns into Ferry Street, it's less of a retail center, and that's part of the riverfront district. And it's the downtown core where you really notice the vacancies that needs that help to fill up.
Right. Okay. Would you be able to comment on the complications concerning converting, or the complications around converting commercial buildings to residential commercial hybrid without raising them to the ground and starting anew? And if those complications, if there's anything this council or this community can do to overcome said complications, is there a pathway to have conversions to residential/commercial hybrids as part of the forthcoming resolution?
Like a live-work unit?
Yeah.
I think the programs for the Downtown Core Housing Initiative would probably be the better tool for that. A live-work may give us some administrative challenges. In downtown Eugene, we've seen commercial conversion to residential. And Broadway and Olive, where it's now Wells Fargo on the
Right.
ground floor, above that, it used to be a bank and office space, and now it's all residential. And there's a building on Pearl Street between 8th and Broadway that the Public Works Engineering used to be in, but now it's residential. And so we've actually had some real good success with it. There's some interest in converting existing buildings to residential. They're trying to work through the architectural and engineering issues. It's really building to building, whether or not it's feasible. Really big floor plates are harder to convert. Smaller buildings are a little bit easier to convert. And so, but I think the tools that we have to encourage housing are going to be the primary tool to move in that direction.
Great, thank you. My final question, and apologies for physically being tardy today. I was monitoring electronically on the way in here. And Ann, you said that the sidewalk, this is a bit of a sensitive question, so I apologize in advance. That you said, I'm trying to quote you directly, the sidewalk adjacent to the federal building is not part of this?
Not part of it.
Why is that?
Well, when we first started looking at this work, it was about a year ago. And that sidewalk didn't have the challenges that the sidewalk on the west side of Pearl and the sidewalks on Oak Street have. They were in good enough shape at that time that we didn't include it in this effort. It wasn't part of the scope of work.
Okay, okay. All right, I may follow up on it, because of the complications around that building right now that we're witnessing. I may follow up offline about ideas and suggestions, but,
It's also outside of the urban renewal districts.
oh, it is? Well, then, never mind. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you.
Counselor Kaczynski?
Thank you. Thank you so much for the presentation and the work that you've been doing on this. I feel like most of my actual questions got either answered through your presentation or through other counselors. So I just figured I would chime in with my support for moving forward with this project. I think it's going to be a very, very beneficial project for our downtown. And then I also wanted to reference some of the previous projects that you mentioned earlier in the presentation and note that in particular, the new trash cans, I feel like have made a huge difference for cleanliness downtown and feeling like things downtown are clean and comfortable to walk around. It's a very noticeable difference, and I see that as an example of the type of benefit that some of these small investments can provide. So thank you so much.
Counselor Zelenka?
Thanks. Yeah, I think this is a good program too. Should help. I think $2 million seems like an appropriate amount for a pilot. If it does good things, you can expand it. Having dealt with tenant-owner relationships in previous careers, I have a question about how that works with sometimes tenants do things without owner's permission, and sometimes that gets them in trouble, or how are we handling that?
One element of an application would definitely be getting the property owner's sign off. No application would be considered complete without authorization from the property owner.
Okay, good. And the selection process for is this first come, first serve, or is it competitive?
The program priorities that we've written in here that are the key criteria for grants would let us give us some flexibility to choose between applications that best meet the urban renewal plan's goals. If we had applications at the same time that were in that sort of competitive state, if the applications don't come in at the same time, we're not processing them at the same time, and it's not considered to be in that sort of competitive state, then it would be more of a first come, first serve kind of status for as long as the money's available to keep giving grants.
So do you have evaluation criteria that you're using that would allow you to deny an application for a grant
It's
that are clear to the potential participants? Like, it has to be the eligible improvements. You have to have all these other different things. So you have to checkbox all of these things, right, in your application. If you don't meet it, then it's incomplete, and you would be denied.
Correct. And it's written so that we can lean on the goals in the urban renewal plans to say this isn't quite cutting the mustard. You might be making progress in one area, but there could be a perception of doing damage in some other element of one of the urban plan goals that would let us deny an application. It's written so that we have some adaptability to the kinds of projects that we can let in, but anything that is the urban renewal plan goals themselves are written in intentionally to give us a reason to put applications forward or deny them. Is that enough of an answer for you, Counselor?
Yeah. There's another criteria in here. Businesses and uses supported by grant funds must be open to minors during significant portion of regular business hours. Why is that in there?
When we were considering whether or not there would be a list of particular uses that we would disallow, what it boiled down to was that item of whether or not a business allows minors during all business operations as an umbrella requirement that would rule out, among other things, dispensaries, adult uses and retail, and bars that are not open as restaurants at certain times of the day. It was a good catch-all requirement for several categories we suspected would make it onto a list of uses not to support with grants.
You know this off the top of your head, roughly what percentage of buildings does that exclude?
In terms of existing businesses downtown, I
Yeah,
don't have a
that
number on
wouldn't
that.
meet that criteria. Seemed like a lot. Seemed like maybe even up to a half.
I don't have a better number. What's in terms of current business activity? Apologies.
Thanks, Mayor.
Counselor Ye?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So it sounds like your plan is when this starts, it would just be like a rolling open application kind of process? Okay, so I have thoughts about that. If it's a 5-year pilot, and I would assume we would run out of money at the beginning and not have money for later. So I don't know how I feel about it, but I do think that first come, first serve benefits folks who are maybe more experienced and would probably not benefit people from marginalized communities. So I don't know if you can give this some thought between now and then. I don't have like the perfect solution, but it seems like having an opportunity to have some applications come in at bundled times so that you could then compare them to each other might give opportunities for us to apply some of these criteria better than just each one comes along and does it check the boxes? Yes, it checks one of the boxes. Great, here's your money. Rather than are we able to support these marginalized populations that are trying to get something done and have had many barriers in their way throughout the process. So that would be my only feedback. Otherwise, I think this is great, and I really appreciate you working on this and bringing this forward to us.
That's very helpful feedback.
Thank you, staff. I'm going to turn to our agency president in a moment to put a motion forward, but I just want to offer echo appreciations for this program and the outreach specifically that you've identified to emergent businesses, but also to commercial brokers and people who emergent businesses are likely talking with about the possibility of tenanting. I think that is an incredibly important connection point in all of the work that we're doing downtown. I also share some of the thoughts that Councillor Ye just identified, that having the ability to compare rafts of applications is useful, but I also think the nimble nature of this program and its responsiveness to opportunity is really important to preserve. And so as you're looking at the information that would come back as resolution related to this work, trying to strike that balance could be important. And with a pilot program, even in the first year, we might learn something, or the first 2 years of 5, about how it is that people are thinking about tenanting. And we know that there are typical leases involved. We know there are typical timelines, and that might also tell us about churn and the possibility of transition in different locations. So just add those thoughts to the mix that you all are considering. With that, I will now. Okay. Councillor Keating for a 30-second second round.
Mayor, thank you, and thank you, colleagues. Councillor Zelenka's questioning got me thinking about one of my favorite theaters in the region. Happens to be squarely in the downtown urban renewal district, and they do show rated R movies that would prevent minors from attending. And I think that catch-all might prevent one of our serious economic drivers, the Broadway Metro, from being able to capitalize on these grants. When you're proposing the resolution, my recommendation would be find a way to carve out and create a pathway for local movie theaters to still who are tenants, to still access the dollars that are available to the rest of the downtown community, please.
Definitely agreed, and I would clarify, figuring out the right wording for that requirement around the allowing minors was a little bit tricky. The intent is that in order to be made ineligible, a business would have to be closed to minors at all hours. So the fact that minors could go to a movie earlier in the day would make a business like that eligible.
That's helpful. I appreciate that clarification. I wouldn't want them to be sidelined. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Council. I will now turn to the agency president to put a motion forward.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for this project and proposal. I'm very supportive and happy to make this motion. I move to direct the agency director to bring back resolutions related to the Downtown Urban Renewal District and the Riverfront Urban Renewal District for a proposed tenant improvement program incorporating the program elements described in Attachment A to this AIS.
Second.
Any further discussion from council agency? Seeing none, I'll now take a vote for this motion. All in favor, please raise your hand. I see 3 in the room, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Everyone, thank you very much. In favor, and the motion passes unanimously with a vote of 8-0. Thank you all, and thank you, staff. That concludes our first agenda item today. Now turn to the agency director to introduce our second topic, which is an action on the Riverfront Urban Renewal District and appointment to the River Guides Advisory Committee. A little bit of a redux to make sure that we've crossed our Ts and dotted our Is.
Thank you. This action item is an opportunity to review the mayor's nominations and appoint 4 new members to the Riverfront Urban Renewal Advisory Committee, also known as the River Guides. The mayor's nominations are included in Attachment A. The council approved all 4 of these appointments at the June 8th council meeting. However, the Riverfront Urban Renewal Plan and the process you approve for the River Guides appointment requires agency board approval, which you are currently gavelled in to do.
Thank you, agency director. I'll now turn to the agency president to put a motion forward. Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Evans has a question. Councillor Evans.
I don't. My hand was still up. I was stuck from the last time.
Thank you, Councillor. Then I'll turn back to the agency president to, unless Councillor Zelenka, is your hand new?
Yeah, it is.
Thank you.
City manager said 4 appointments. The AIS has Dan Carroll, Phil Farrington, and Joe Malone, Dana Siebert, all of which are great. And they're advisory to the council, which is, I think, people should know for the record. Thank you.
Thank you, agency president. Back to you to put a motion forward.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to appoint Dan Carroll, Phil Farrington, Joe Mole, and Dana Siebert to the Riverfront Urban Renewal Advisory Committee, River Guides, for a 2-year term beginning July 1, 2026 and ending on June 30th, 2028.
I think I heard a second from Councillor Kaczynski.
Yes, seconds.
Thank you, Councillor. We lost your audio for just a moment there and only heard the last of the last syllable. Any further discussion from the agency? Seeing none, I'll now take a vote for this motion. All in favor, please raise your hands. Thank you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And the motion passes unanimously with a vote of 8-0. Thank you all, and I now close the June 24th, 2026 Urban Renewal Agency meeting and call the June 24th Eugene City Council work session to order. And we will turn back to City Manager Haruyama to introduce our third topic, which is a work session on an ordinance establishing a residential energy performance disclosure requirement, adding sections 6.760, 6.765, 6.770, 6.775, and 6.780 to the Eugene Code 1971 and providing an effective date.
Thank you, Mayor. The council's directed the city manager to develop a draft ordinance that requires sellers to disclose a home energy score when listing a home for sale. Before you this afternoon is an ordinance for your review. Council can provide feedback, direct the city manager to schedule a public hearing and/or a work session for possible action. We have members that are setting up right now from our sustainability team that will make a presentation to you.
Good afternoon, City Council and Mayor. My name is Danielle Klinkabel, and I am a climate policy analyst in the Sustainability Program. Joining me is Ian Penn, the Sustainability Manager. So at this work session, staff are presenting a draft ordinance and code provisions for a residential energy performance disclosure requirement. This work builds on 2 previous work sessions held in February and March, where staff discussed policy work related to home energy scores. As a quick agenda, I will review what was shared at the prior 2 work sessions. Then I will go over the draft ordinance and code. Today, you may review the draft and you may decide to direct the city manager to schedule a public hearing and a work session for possible adoption. So I spent a lot of time at the work session in February talking about the condition of much of Eugene's housing stock, with many homes in our region being very inefficient. These conditions lead to higher energy costs, reduced indoor air quality and comfort, and inefficient energy use. From talking directly to many residents, we know that many of them are unaware of how to address these issues. A round of engagement that we conducted in 2024 highlighted that people need more guidance on home improvements that can improve energy efficiency and want more education about existing incentives. Expanding the use of home energy scores is one pathway to help achieve these priorities. Previous city council motions have directed the city manager to explore a home energy score disclosure requirement in Eugene by doing engagement, research, and creating an implementation plan. There is one more motion related to developing options for renters. Staff are currently focused on developing the policy for home sales first, because this is a much more straightforward pathway. This direction was also established through Eugene's CAP 2.0, our climate action plan, with Action B4, which directed the city to identify strategies for implementing a mandatory home energy score program. So before I get any deeper, I just want to do a quick refresh on what a home energy score is. Basically, it's an energy assessment tool developed by the U.S. Department of Energy to evaluate a variety of physical and mechanical features throughout a home. The assessor creates a report that provides a score on a scale of 1 to 10 based on the energy usage of the home, kind of like a miles per gallon rating for a car. And the report also includes a lot of other helpful information, like estimated energy costs of the home, recommended improvements, and available rebates. Many other cities, including 4 in Oregon, have implemented a home energy score disclosure requirement. So the way it works with that requirement is that the owner of a home would get a home energy score before they advertise the home for sale. They would include the home energy score and report in the listing, and then any prospective buyer can view the information as they look at the home. The goals are to increase transparency by providing clear, consistent information about the home's energy use and costs, educate homeowners and buyers about potential opportunities for improving energy efficiency, and finally, to connect homeowners to resources and incentives that can help finance upgrades. So again, many of these goals align with other council priorities established through the Climate Action Plan, as well as the strategic plan and Eugene's housing implementation pipeline. So my point with that is that moving in this policy direction continues to move the ball down the field with some of council's larger goals. At the February work session, I also provided an in-depth overview of our engagement and research. Staff engaged roughly 630 people specifically on the home energy score policy last fall and winter. In general, there was broad community support. What we heard is that many people think this information would be useful, though they did have some concerns around how this would affect the housing market. The full engagement report is included as attachment B. We also hired Earth Advantage to research what has been learned in other cities who have the policy. They also looked at recommended best practices and summarized some of the housing market trends in Eugene. And what we learned from their research is that in other cities who have this requirement, homebuyers are using the information to make more informed home investment decisions. Homes that get a score are more likely to make upgrades that improve energy efficiency, and there really has been no discernible impacts to the housing market. The full research report is attachment C. There are various costs associated with implementing and managing this requirement, including personnel and non-personnel costs. I discussed these in depth at the March work session. But to summarize, the requirement is estimated to require about half an FTE to manage compliance, communication, and outreach. There are some startup costs to establish data and reporting systems and to make sure we have enough assessors before the policy takes effect. There are also some ongoing costs to maintain the home energy score system locally and to provide free scores for low-income households. So in total, it's estimated that this policy will cost approximately $100,000 on an ongoing basis. At the March work session, staff discussed the phases to implement this requirement. So everything I just shared about engagement and research and cost estimates has laid a foundation for the policy. And so that was phase 1. We are moving into phase 2 with a draft ordinance, which has been informed by all of the groundwork completed in phase 1. So staff have developed the draft ordinance and code provisions to create a home energy score disclosure requirement. It is titled the Residential Energy Performance Disclosure Requirement, and it's included in your packet as Attachment A. The key components of the code include general requirements to obtain and disclose a home energy performance score and report when a dwelling unit is listed for sale, with the U.S. Department of Energy Home Energy Score tool being the required assessment methodology. In terms of administration, the code provides authority to the city manager to establish administrative rules to implement and enforce the code, to provide the authority to provide financial assistance for income qualified sellers, and the authority to levy an administrative civil penalty for noncompliance. The code identifies conditions under which a dwelling unit is exempt, such as under a variety of distressed sale situations or involuntary sales, such as a pre-foreclosure sale, a trustee's sale, and a few others. There are also exemptions for dwelling units for housing types that cannot be scored using the home energy score tool or that have a non-residential use. So commercial buildings, large multi-story apartment complexes, industrial buildings would not be subject to this. And finally, the code also identifies conditions under which the score and report expire, so after 8 years or if an alteration has been made that would change the energy usage of the home. If council were to move forward with this after a public hearing, the code specifies that the requirement would take effect 6 months after adoption to give staff time to develop the program. In terms of how this requirement will function in practice for people, is that most people would only be subject to this requirement when they sell their home, so typically only once or twice in a lifetime, and they tend to be guided through that process by a realtor. So before listing their home, the seller would get a score included in the listing. If they qualify for an exemption or a free score, they would submit some paperwork or a brief application. If the listing is posted without a score, they would be notified. They will have time. They will be provided, a grace period to comply, and repeated non-compliance after notification may result in a penalty. We recognize that for realtors, this will be another item on the checklist to complete before a home can be listed, and so much of our outreach and support will be geared towards them. Buyers will be able to view home energy scores in online listings and during home showings so that they can use this information to compare different homes or when discussing an offer. The information is different than what's in an inspection report, so this becomes additional information that a buyer has when making that final decision. If council decides to adopt the requirement, staff would recommend that the city follows the approach of other cities to support a smooth rollout and compliance. So this would include doing outreach, developing a public-facing website, and communication materials before the requirement goes into effect. We'd also recommend organizing a training to ensure there is sufficient energy assessors to meet the new demand. And as for how we would recommend approaching enforcement, what we've seen in other cities is that they tend to do consistent monitoring, and when a house is not compliant, they would provide notification and support. It is helpful, we've learned, for there to be the backstop of a penalty for failure to comply after repeated notification. And typically that penalty is notably higher than the cost of getting a score. The intention really is to maximize compliance, not to levy penalties. And this approach has proven effective in other cities. So we would recommend the city manager adopt a similar process in the administrative rules. So basically, in summary, what we can reasonably expect as an outcome of this requirement is that it would expand access to information about energy usage, energy improvements, and available incentives, and that this would lead to homes becoming more energy efficient over time. This policy direction aligns with previous goals and priorities that Council has established. And the draft code has been informed by research, engagement, and best practices that we've learned. So as for next steps, Council has the opportunity to review the ordinance and code, and today you may decide to direct the city manager to schedule a public hearing and a work session for possible adoption. And at this time, we'd like to open it up. We are happy to answer any questions that would inform your decision. And with that, I turn it back over to the mayor.
Thank you, staff, for this work and that update. I have Councillor Clark, Councillor Zelenka, Councillor Kaczynski, Councillor Keating, and Councillor Groves in the queue. And Councillor Evans before Councillor Keating, and then Councillor Groves.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, staff, for the presentation. I appreciate that. As I have mentioned before in previous presentations on this, I'm absolutely in favor of the idea of homebuyers having all the possible information that reflects on their sale or their purchase that they could have, and as a very good thing. It leads to better outcomes for everybody in a whole host of ways. I wonder, in the analysis of this, if staff is familiar with the new requirement for the UAD 3.6 form at all.
I am not familiar with that.
I'm sure we'll hear about it in the public hearing, but if there is one, but the vast majority of homes are purchased with a mortgage. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac purchase those from the people who make them. And Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have issued a directive and a federal directive for all mortgages that will come to them that they would potentially purchase, that the appraisal forms change. They started in September. They really began in circulation in January, but by November 2nd of this year, those new forms have to be what all appraisals are contained. The UAD is Uniform Appraisal Data Set. And in the new form, it has a whole section on energy efficiency analysis of every home that they do. So I'm wondering my first question was, do you know the difference between this proposed energy audit score and what's already going to be contained in the brand new requirement as of November 2nd?
That's a great question. We can look into it more and follow up.
I'd really be interested to know that. My understanding of it, and I haven't researched it thoroughly, but I have done quite a bit of reading on it. And to me, it seems like a duplication of efforts in what is already going to be required by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac for any standard mortgage. So I don't understand why we would want to increase the cost of housing to duplicate information. But I will appreciate your response when you have it. Thank you.
Councillor Zelenka.
Yeah, thank you. To my knowledge, this wouldn't be duplicative, it'd be supplemental. And what's clear is voluntary programs like that have been tried, even in Eugene, don't work. It's super crystal clear that that's true. And in this case, the benefits far outweigh the costs to the individual and to the community. We've been working on this since 2019. So, and 4 other cities have already done this and worked out all the kinks: Portland, Hillsborough, Bend, Milwaukee. So there's over 60,000 home energy scores that have been done. So we're on the tail end of this, but good for us to finally get there. And the fact that nothing's shown that it makes housing more expensive, I think is a really important point. But it does provide really important information about operating costs, which are really significant for affordability, increased livability in particular. I'm eager to move on to the next steps. A question about the source of funding. Have you had much thought about that in terms of where the source of the half of FTE come from? Could it be partially from the fees and partially general fund? Or?
Yeah, so at the March work session, we talked about possible funding approaches for this. The possibilities are redirect existing program resources, so our current budget in the sustainability program, redirect it towards this and, cut other things off of our current work plan. The second option is to allocate additional funding, reprioritize funding through a budget process to the program. And the third option is to look at one of the revenue options generated by the revenue advisors team. So those were the 3 options that were shared. In terms of using fines to cover this,
not fines, fees. The fee associated with, not the penalties, but the fee to get the home energy score. Like $5 could go towards paying for staff. That was what I was thinking of.
Thank you for that, Councilor Zelenko. We had not considered a fee structure as part of this process thus far. Mostly looking at what the other Oregon cities have done on this, the coverage of this has been covered through the private sector. And even in Portland, where they have their clean energy fund, they're funding it. Basically, the private sector is covering these funds through that. So we had not thought about that as a funding source for this.
Okay, might want to consider it. Thanks.
Councillor Evans.
There I am. Thanks, Mayor. Just a couple of quick questions here. One of the things that I've come across over the years and continue to come across on the regular is code violations. So how do we factor in properties who have code violations that are piled up? And how do they factor into the score? A lot of these code violations are focused on people who are hoarding and doing other things to distress their properties. Maybe not intentionally, but they're there. How do we factor in those when those properties come available, for sale? And then we realize that there are fines and other things that are in arrears to the city. For going back to Councilor Zelenka's question is, can we use some of those revenues that we haven't collected, that we should be collecting, to help support this program?
I'm going to try to answer that question, but I can only do so on a pretty general level. It sounds like you're talking about a situation where the city has enforced and imposed civil penalties that maybe hadn't been paid. And generally, those can become a lien on the property that the city can collect at the time of the sale.
there is no direct connection between the use of those funds toward a program like this. It's something we could talk with finance about, but I think it's pretty unlikely.
Yeah, I would like to get, a legal opinion on that, because again, we have a number of fines that are in arrears that we have not been able to collect or have not collected. And these things tend to stretch out 3, 4, 5 years. If there's a situation where someone is being forced to sell the property, or the mortgage holder is, wanting to clean this thing up, I'm seeing this as kind of a way to help finance this program at the same time cleaning up some distressed properties that continue to sprout up all around the community.
Yeah, we could provide that to you. I think it may come to you from finance or from our office, but we can get back to you with something on that.
I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Counselor Kaczynski?
Yes, thank you. And thank you, staff, for all your work on this program. I'm really excited to see it move forward. I think we've talked about the benefits of this program, and in order to nudge and encourage people to make energy efficient improvements to their home and to find resources to help them do that. So I'm excited to see it move forward to a public hearing. I did have a very sort of specific in the weeds question about some of the language of the code. I was particularly looking at section 6.7852. Am I understanding that language correctly to mean that if I got a home energy score done, and then decided, I saw on the report that I could get a rebate for upgrading my water heater, decided to do that, then I would have to get and then I decided to list my house 3 months later, I would then have to get another home energy score as part of listing the house. Am I understanding that piece correctly?
That's correct. As written in the code, if owner makes any type of alteration to the home that would alter the energy usage of the home, that would make the home energy score report invalid and therefore invalid. So they would need to get a new score to remain compliant.
I would be interested because I can see that being a point of friction, where if we have someone who's trying to do something that decreases their energy usage, makes their home more efficient, that then it almost might feel like they're being penalized for doing that because then they have to get another score. So if there's some way that we can smooth that a little bit, I understand the intent is that, like, if I went and ripped out all my solar panels, that probably should be reflected in the score. But like if there's any way that we can kind of help smooth that, if it's so it doesn't come across to people as feeling like they're being asked to do the same thing over and over because they did the thing we wanted them to do. And I don't know how possible that is, but I think it's worth exploring.
Thank you.
So thank you.
I think that's something that staff would want to think about and consider, and we probably want to look at some of the other jurisdictions to see if this is something that they've experienced.
That would be very helpful. Thank you.
Counselor Keating?
Thank you, Mayor. Like a dog with a bone, I'm going to pick up and run with two things that I was very excited to hear colleagues talk about. First and foremost, Councilor Kaczynski, thank you for your thoughts around the potential for what I would call a home energy score amendment or a home energy score adjustment that would allow or incent persons to make the improvements that Councilor Kaczynski was so clearly talking about. If there's a home energy score that shows there's a need for improvement, a seller makes those improvements, there should be a pathway that doesn't start the clock again. And I don't know what that time period is. I leave that to the experts, but a year, 6 months, or a year seems to be just from my vantage point, reasonable. So thank you again, Councilor Kaczynski, for bringing that up. Councilor Zelenka talked about the fee structure, or the opportunity for I guess my words, not his, but taking a portion of the home energy, it's like $125 to $200, somewhere in that ballpark, a portion of those that cost, and putting it toward the staff work. I would support that approach, but in addition, I would also want to put a portion toward the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. That's just me, and I hope colleagues and staff and the team would agree that that would be a wise use of funds, but assigning or appropriating a portion thereof, I would be enthusiastically supportive of exploring. And finally, on slide 12, we talk about how the requirement will function for sellers, realtors, and buyers. But there's no there's nothing in here that talks about renters who might be prospective buyers. We live in an energy inefficient home in South Eugene. We love our home. We've lived there for 5 years. Would love to buy that home someday. And I don't know if there's any incentive for us as the tenants to do a home energy score that would show certainly how energy inefficient it is and where the needs to improve are. I don't know if that's it. If you could talk about that gap, and then I got a quick follow-up on that point, please.
Yeah, so anyone today, including renters or an occupant, an owner, can get a home energy score at any time they want. So that is something renters can take advantage of to be able to better understand maybe what that home needs, whether or not they're, and just get more that type of useful information. The other way that this policy can benefit renters is sort of more as a pass-through, like if a seller sells a home, an owner buys it and then rents it out, the future renter would be able to view the home energy score report online still. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but.
Yeah, to a degree. I'm fuzzy on the incentive that a renter would have to do the home energy score.
That points to, I think, one of the challenges that we've experienced in Eugene of having a voluntary-only program right now. Tried to focus on with the program that we had in partnership with EWEB and U of O, which is a voluntary program, was focusing particularly on renters and income-qualified homeowners. And the idea was, if you're a renter, you're probably not going to invest in a big heat pump. But there are things you could do that are relatively small. Light bulbs, other things that you could do that you have control over, that you have an agency over. And so the reports are really tailored to that function. And so we've tried to serve a little bit of that need. But I think your point's taken, that a lot of the big things that you could do, there is not a financial incentive. The split problem is what we call that, and it's something that nobody's figured out how to solve that problem yet. It's something that I think if we moved into looking at this from a renter perspective as a next phase of this work, that would be something we'd want to focus on, but nobody's quite cracked that nut yet of how to figure out how to deal with that split incentive where the landlord doesn't have an incentive because they're not using the energy, and the renter doesn't have the equity, so they're trying to figure out ways in which, and there isn't a solution out there, but there is an ability to get a report today that could focus on you as a renter and the things that you could do without making really big expenditures. And there are exciting things that are coming on board, balcony solar and other things that you can take with you when you move to another facility that are coming online, and there's going to be a focus of legislative attention in Salem next year that will provide more opportunities to democratize energy use for renters as well as homeowners. And so those things are coming, and so there's more opportunities that continue to present themselves.
Appreciate that. Thank you. And then finally, how would someone potentially refute the home energy score? Let's say someone, whether they're a buyer, seller, renter, whoever, they say, I refute that. That's subjective. I want a redo. Who do they go to refute that the score?
I'm going to try my best to answer this, but from what I understand is part of that fee that a seller would pay to get a home energy score, part of that, I think it's around $35, goes towards quality assurance. And Earth Advantage, which sort of manages the program in Oregon, does that quality assurance on a spot check basis to make sure that scores are accurately calculated. And so my understanding is that's sort of the fallback to ensure that scores are accurate. If someone disputes a score, they could get another one. They could contact Earth Advantage to do quality assurance on that score. Those would be the two pathways I can think of from what I know, but if you have other.
I would just add to that there are jurisdictions, the other 4 Oregon jurisdictions, where they basically have a dispute process. And I think if this proceeded and we went into rulemaking, we would have a workflow where somebody could come in and contest the score. And we have to figure out the details of that. We'd want to learn from what other cities have done. But I think having that mechanism is in the other 4 cities, and we would certainly find something that would work for Eugene as well.
Councillor Groves.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the work that you've put into this and for the report today. I certainly support education on energy improvements and efficiencies. I support providing assistance and connecting homeowners to grants and financing options that improve efficiencies. I like that part of this. On the other hand, I just feel like our council, we never shy away from a regulation. We seem to love regulations, and I feel like we're over-regulated. But at the same time, putting that aside, I'm interested in what Councillor Clark talked about regarding the new federal requirement that's taking effect November 2nd. I think before we get too far down this line, it'd be nice to know where these line up with the program we're proposing. I know the Toxics Right to Know program, shortly after we put that in place, the state came out with its own requirements that are almost identical, and we require businesses to fill out 2 separate forms in 2 separate processes, and I hear about that all the time. The other thing I had on my list too, what Councilor Keating brought up regarding disputing the findings. I've seen whole home inspections. I saw one that said the house was on a foundation when it wasn't. It was on a slab, and it was on a foundation. So there's got to be a way to address problems, and I think it needs to be built into this. I don't have a problem with taking this to a public hearing. Jury's still out for me whether I will support it or not. I think it just depends what the final version looks like. And then also, in the other jurisdictions that have adopted this, have you found any information that shows a disparity for seniors and low-income buyers? I've been in thousands of homes in this community through my career as a firefighter. And my observation is many of our senior citizens on fixed incomes and our low-income people are in older structures. And for example, you can't take a 2x4 exterior stud wall and ever make it compatible or comparable to a 2x6 exterior stud wall. I mean, they're just going to have different ratings. So what do we know about the effects on low income and seniors?
Thanks for that question and the rest of your comments. I think your last comment about, are we noticing like equity impacts for low-income homes, senior-occupied homes, and that was a big focus of our research. Okay. There's been quite a bit of research done on that Earth Advantage was able to compile for us, and the analysis showed that there really isn't significant differences in scores across low-income or higher income census tracts. And like the differences were pretty nominal, not statistically significant. And I think what this points to is the score. I mean, a brand new home that has, a huge vaulted ceiling and full air conditioning and, very large square footage can get a low score because it's using a lot of energy. That doesn't mean it's a bad home. It just means it's using a lot of energy. And conversely, a home that might not have been maintained very well could get a low score too. But so the score itself isn't necessarily an indicator of low income or home value. It's just a descriptor of how much energy use that home has.
Thank you. You just raised another question. So we just look at a single address and what that energy score is. It doesn't take into consideration energy consumption per square foot.
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Well, you were just saying a larger home's going to consume more energy, which is correct. But it seems like there should be some factoring in of the size per square foot. So if you're getting a bigger house, you can expect to be paying more in property taxes and everything else.
So I appreciate that point, Councilor Groves. The tool itself was designed to not measure an energy efficiency metric. It's just a pure energy metric. So it doesn't focus on behavior. It doesn't focus on the occupant. It focuses on the physical characteristics of the home and the assets within the home that use energy. So the idea is to take behavior and to take personal characteristics out of it to make it comparison between different homes. Not just to look at one home, is to be able to say home A, home B, is there a way to do an apples to apples comparison instead of apples to pineapples? So they try to get away from some of those metrics because people just use energy in different ways within their homes. And this takes that out of it by providing basically a standardized way in which it assumes occupancy and energy use so that it can be comparable across jurisdictions, across building types, across locations where you might actually be using this tool.
I still think you take a 600 square foot ADU and compare it to a 4,000 square foot house. I think we are comparing apples to pineapples. I mean, that's how I see it. But I'm not really sure how to get to that, and I'm out of time. So thank you very much.
Councillor Ye, and then a quick round in a moment with Councillor Clark and Councillor Zelenka before I'll turn to Council President to put a motion forward.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you guys so much for coming back on this. While it has taken a long time to get to this place, being a little behind maybe wasn't the worst thing. I really appreciate the data you guys have been able to bring to us during this process and being able to learn from other communities that have done this and feel confident that some of these unintended consequences that we might have been worried about at the beginning of this process have not panned out to be true in these other communities, and so we can move forward a little more confidently. So I really do appreciate the work that you guys did to get all of that information. I just had one clarifying question. I'm pretty sure I know, but I want to make sure all of that education and outreach that you guys have been talking about is in that non-personnel startup cost, correct? Is it in that 35?
The education and outreach that we would plan to do if this moves forward. So that 35, let me just, hold on, let me make sure I'm looking at the right. Yeah, so the personnel costs is the half an FTE that would be organizing new communication materials, doing outreach to realtors, developing up the system to work and the reporting templates. The staffing costs that would be involved in launching this. The non-personnel startup costs include doing the cost to hire a trainer to come train up assessors, as well as start the low-income assistance fund to provide free scores, and so yeah, that's what it's included in that.
I thought so. Just want to make sure. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. I also want to appreciate Councillor Keating's bringing up the fact that tenants are a separate group that doesn't really fall into what we're doing today. And I really appreciate Ian saying that that could be a second phase that we look at as we're moving down this road and looking at different opportunities and how we can help tenants feel more comfortable that they know what they're renting, eyes wide open, right, as you're going forward. So yeah, I think we're in a good place, and it's time to move forward and get a public hearing and hear what people have to say. And I don't know much about what Councillor Clark brought up, but I would be interested to hear, just let's make sure, let's dot our I's and cross our T's. Yeah, thank you so much.
I'm going to turn to Councillor Clark and Councillor Zelenka for a 30-second round in a moment, but want to ask a couple of quick questions first. And make one observation that homes are very personal. We think about our home. And so that can also take us into a space of anecdotal conversation. But I really appreciate what you shared about the Earth Advantage analysis of this program, and that there was no additional cost associated with homes as a result of this program, and while at the same time delivering some really useful information to the people who are occupying that housing, both presently and potentially into the future. So that's very useful. I have two quick questions. One of them is about home inspection processes, and Councillor Grove raised this briefly. I would think it would just be helpful for us to know more about how home inspection home inspectors are certified and also how energy assessors. I would imagine if you are an entrepreneurial home inspector and this policy is changing in your community, you would be thinking about how you could also become an energy assessor because you're looking at the same things. You're under the house, you're in the attic, you're looking at the appliances. That is all valuable information to realtors and real estate partners. And so I would be curious to know how our Lane Community College Energy Management Program or other assessment certifications programs plug into this so that we're connecting that workforce component. And then I guess a quick question, which could be for future discussion if this council would like, but that as we've heard today, there are a lot of benefits in this program attached to new owners understanding the energy efficiency of their homes, of course related to new housing being much more efficient than housing built 20 or 30 or 50 years ago, and a lot of benefit for people who are new and moving into our community. I'm curious and would love to know in the future if we could have a conversation about how these improvements made to our existing housing stock could be something that the current occupants of that housing take advantage of. For most people who've ever owned and then sold a home, there are a lot of improvements that happen to that home at the point of sale that would have been delightful to experience as a homeowner in that house. I'm sure there are a lot of people in our community who can feel some resonance with that experience. I think that that also extends to tenants in terms of their relationship to property owners and the timing of improvements to properties. So I would just be interested for us to explore that in the future and to think about the ways in which we can learn from this program and then make sure that the benefits of energy efficiency and those reduced costs are available to more people within our community sooner rather than later. Councillor Clark and then Councillor Zelenka, and then I will turn to Council President Leach.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate it. I just wanted to for the sake of the audience watching, I just wanted to clear up maybe not misinformation, but perhaps any confusion associated with all of our comments here, but one of my colleagues particularly. While this program that we have for doing an energy analysis is currently a volunteer program and has been, and other programs in other communities may be voluntary, there is absolutely nothing voluntary about what is required by the federal government of anyone who is an appraiser professionally as of November 2nd. If they want to retain their license, every appraisal done in every city in the country by every appraiser has to contain a section on energy efficiency. No questions, nothing voluntary about it. If the people doing the work want to keep their license, they must fill in that data on the form that's pre-made by the federal government. So this analysis will be done.
Thank you, Councillor Clark, for that clarification and that information. Councillor Zelenka?
Yeah, interest of full disclosure, the people at the Oregon Department of Energy that work for me administer the contract with Earth Advantage, and that's paid for through federal funds but I don't have any conflict of interest, nor do I have any benefit from it. There is, by the way, a contract to have Earth Advantage look at how to apply this to rental properties only at the sale at this time. So Matt, it could end up being there. That's what Earth Advantage is looking at now. On the issue of the assessment, if you go to Oregon Department of Energy and look up home energy score, you can see an assessment, actually see what's in there. And basically, there's not going to be very many disputes, and there aren't any because it's mostly just math. It's you look at the history of how much energy is used, what's square feet, what's energy used per square foot, and then here's the things that typically are. And then
Councillor Zelenka.
Other homes, so it's not very disputable. It's mostly math.
Thank you for pointing us to that resource also, and thank you to all of our councils who are plugging into this work session remotely today. I'm now going to turn to the Council President and ask that there be a motion put forward.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm really looking forward to seeing this go to a public hearing myself. So I'm happy to put this motion on the table. I move to direct the city manager to schedule a public hearing on the ordinance establishing a residential energy performance disclosure requirement provided at attachment A to this AIS, and to set a date for council deliberations and possible action.
Second.
Any further discussion from council? Seeing none, I'll now take a vote for this motion. Councilors all in favor, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3 in the room here, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on screen. Thank you, council. And the motion passes unanimously with a vote of 8-0. Thank you all, and thank you, staff, for answering those many questions. This concludes our agenda for today, and I now close the June 24th, 2026 City Council work session. We are adjourned.